Hello once again. Thank you for viewing this video. This video now is about finances. We discuss the salary that you can expect to get as a newly qualified architect, and also part 1 and a part 2. Now this follows on from my articles, The Broke Architect. There is a part 1 and there's a part 2 which will feature. And in this video I'm kind of using that article as a basis for communicating visually what I was kind of talking about and the research and the polls that I did on LinkedIn. So please watch, learn and comment. These is just my opinion, and I just hope you get some great value from this. Thank you. Throughout history, architects have played one of the most important roles in society. Designers of places to live, work, play, learn, worship, and so much more. Some might even go so far as to say they have been instrumental in creating the identifying personality and general mood of individual countries. Now, architects' work can be so outstanding that they can become a catalyst for change. Notably, the architect Frank Gehry creating a destination building for a once rundown industrial city of Bilbao with his design of the Guggenheim Museum. So this building transformed Bilbao and put it onto the world stage. The cultural impact was immense, the financial even more so. And many cities followed this example, using architects like Norman Foster and Zaha Hadid to use their talent of design to bring value to a place. That's why, understandably, the path to qualifying as an architect is not easy. It can take on average 7 to 10 years, sometimes even more. Common challenges that architecture students often encounter are financial, emotional, and physical stress, with a culture of long hours in the studio, and in a lot of cases, family and friends not being able to offer adequate support simply because they don't understand the nature of the discipline. As a fellow of both the Royal Institute of British Architects, the RIBA, and the Royal Society of Arts, the RSA, I wanted to try and find some answers to these questions. I have a network of over 28,000 followers on LinkedIn, comprising professionals from all walks of life and a unique insider view of chartered architecture. So I felt I was in a slightly more advantageous position than most on LinkedIn. So this video aims to explore what the general public think a fair salary for a trainee and a newly qualified architect is and why. It then explores reasons why the salaries can be lower than other professions, which take a similar duration of time and dedication to attain. And to explore this subject, I ran several polls on LinkedIn all over a 7-day period, and the results are presented on this video. The first poll posed the question, why do we value lawyers, doctors, and engineers more than architects? 4 options were offered as a response based on the common themes that I've personally encountered. So options were: don't understand what they do, architects don't add value, architects are too expensive, or lastly, I don't respect architects. Although the poll was viewed well over 19,000 times, only 162 people actually voted. A further 110 independent comments were received. Now, the majority who voted were indeed architects, and 60% of them chose the don't understand what they do option. I'm sure they think that people don't understand what they do. 16% voted that architects are too expensive, and 15% voted that architects don't add value. So it seems from the people who voted that the view is that people believe that the public don't fully understand what architects do. The idea that people don't understand the true value of an architect was bolstered by comments that architects often undercharge for the full value of their services, for fear of putting clients off. So some comments actually suggested that lobbying the government that design professionals should hold some additional proof of competency following Grenfell, to also someone suggesting that architects are not needed anymore, as they are also, there's so many millions of designs to choose from, like it's some sort of a sweetie selection box. But it wasn't all doom and gloom. The poll seems to have caught the attention of some notable members of the profession. Now, in fact, President Alan Jones, he's current RIBA president, he took part in the poll and voted with the majority that people don't seem to understand what architects do. Sumita Singha, who ran for president of the RIBA in 2020, directed me towards an article she wrote in 2015 titled, "Why Pay an Architect When Anyone Can Design for Free?" The article offers some very interesting reasons, citing low fees, too much time spent on the preliminary work, and lack of big projects being a recurring problem which can put even the best architecture firm out of business. Now, even in 2015, award-winning Malcolm Fraser Architects fell into liquidation with the loss of 15 staff, with the owner-director Malcolm Fraser stating he could not make his architecture firm pay. It didn't stack up financially. To quote Mr. Fraser, "The work we did is beautiful and important. However, we have been unable to make it profitable." 2 years earlier, RMJM, one of Scotland's biggest practices, fell into financial difficulties and went into receivership before being rescued. In 2019, ADF, a Glasgow-based firm, was liquidated when several large projects were delayed and it could no longer pay its staff. The liquidator stated, "Unfortunately, the business cannot be sold as a going concern as it is not viable." Nick Moss of Manchester practice 6-2 also ran for RIBA president in 2020. And he stated in an article in the magazine Building Design that he was standing out of frustration and fear that architects had no future if the marginalisation of the profession was not addressed. His focus was on resolving the issues around procurement. One point of note is that he stated it's becoming harder and harder to make the business model work. So, the public generally understand what doctors and lawyers do, but as one comment suggested I received, these professions are based on fear, death and litigation, and a view that these professions are a necessity, whilst architecture is seen as a luxury. This brings us to the second poll. What is the one main reason you are pursuing becoming a chartered architect? I posed this question so I could understand the main reason people are drawn to the architect. Okay, poll 2. What is the main reason you are pursuing becoming or became a chartered architect? So, you wanted to design buildings, you wanted to help society, you wanted a good salary, you wanted to teach architecture. From those who voted, it was clear that it wasn't because of monetary reasons, but more for the passion of designing. To further explore why money wasn't the most attractive factor, I set another poll asking people, what do you believe is a fair salary to pay a newly qualified architect in London and also outside of London? So poll 3 results, 43% think 40 to 44,000 is right. 35% think 36 to 40,000 is about right. 19% of those who voted, 32 to 36,000, and only 3% think 28 to 32,000 is the right salary for those who have newly qualified in London. So poll 4 asked, what do you believe is a fair salary for newly qualified architects in the UK outside of London? So 34% said a fair salary is 32 to 36,000. A very close 33% said that 36 to 40,000 plus was a fair salary, and 22% said 28 to 32,000 was okay, and just 11% said 24 to 28,000. A point to note though is that many who voted were architects themselves. I fully understand that we need doctors, we need lawyers, but architects are the very professionals who design the very hospitals and office that these professionals work in. And yet the people who voted are of the opinion that architects deserve, in fact, a lower salary. I then wanted to understand further from my followers what they felt was a fair salary to pay at the various stages on the journey to become an architect. So poll 5, how much do you believe is a fair salary to pay a Part 1 graduate of architecture for their year out? This is outside of London. Okay, 37% of those, and there were 230 votes, believe that 23 to 26,000 plus is fair. 36% think 20 to 23,000 is fair. 21% think 17 to 20,000, and actually 6% of those who voted think a fair salary for someone who's got a degree is 14,000 to 17,000. So poll 6, how much do you believe is a fair salary to pay Part 1 graduates of architecture for their year out? This is London, inside the M25. Only 44 people voted. So 48% think 23 to 26,000. 25% think 20 to 23,000. 7% think 17 to 19,000. But 20% think 26 to 29,000 for a Part 1 is a fair salary. So poll 7, what is a fair salary to pay Part 2 architecture graduate on their year out inside of London prior to Part 3 qualification? We got 158 people voting. The majority, 47%, thought 32 to 35,000 was right for Part 2. 27% was 29,000 to 32,000. 19% thought 26 to 29,000 was about right, and only 7% thought 23 to 26,000 was fair. So poll 8, what is a fair salary to pay Part 2 architecture graduate on their year out outside of London prior to Part 3 qualification? We got 103 people voting. So 50% think 26 to 29,000 is fair. 35% think 29 to 32 is fair. 13% think 23 to 26 is fair. And 2% think 20 to 23%. Sorry, 20,000 to 23,000 is fair. Could we, as the RIBA, do more for our members with a change in focus from communicating better what architects do so the public fully understand their value to society? Perhaps we can. However, architects must also take responsibility for not communicating better what we do. We must engage with communities in new ways that people understand, using social media platforms, for example, not just the reliance on a website. Many architects are engaging with the public through the creation of podcasting and also now YouTube videos. Architects also need to understand that lowering, undercutting other architects' fees is a race to the bottom, where no one benefits in the long term. We need to stand together as a collective. Is part of the problem also that architects enjoy designing buildings so much that their own business mindset is forgotten, meaning we're willing to work for low fees and forget about the business? In my opinion, the teaching of business side of architecture is something that is sadly lacking in most schools of architecture. In fact, the best resource on this subject is found within a recent book by Jones and Rob Hyde. The book, called Defining Contemporary Professionalism for Architects in Practice and Education. Many subjects are covered, including business, money, marketing, and mentoring for architects. Over a 7-year education, much more time and focus needs to be applied to these critical skills in the architectural training so that architects can arm themselves with the ability to survive and leverage their value in the market. This is something I teach through one-to-one mentoring. In conclusion, I created this video of the article to communicate to a wider audience. The article was inspired by the many diverse comments I received on the polls to explore whether becoming an architect is still a risk worth taking. My own personal belief is that I love my profession. I love practicing as an architect. But I was lucky enough to get a full grant, and my course fees were paid by the taxpayer. Yes, I did have a free education. With the level of debts you may encounter and a low prospect of a fair salary compared to other comparable professions, do you believe the risk of becoming an architect is still a risk worth taking? I will let you decide.